Hello and welcome to Raw Chatter. I am your host speaking, Vicky Midwood, health coach and the addiction eliminator. And I am delighted to be joined by Claire Thomas, who is my guest today. And she has got quite a story to share with you. Claire is a chronic illness and burnout specialist, but she's going to share with us how she became that. So without further ado, Claire, welcome and over to you.
Thank you, Vicky, for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. So yes, I am a chronic illness and burnout specialist, and it all started in 2012. I guess that's the pinnacle moment that I can define. When I was sat in a GP office, I'd just been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. I was told I would never recover. I needed to take antidepressants, and I should go and read a book on stress and anxiety because I was quite stressed at that point. You know, you can imagine you've just been given a diagnosis that doesn't really have a time frame, a way of treating, or they didn't have, back then. And I was on the verge of, I was a paediatric intensive care nurse and I loved it. And I was told that basically my career as I knew it was over. So I was very stressed.
Wow.
And so
just for the listeners who may not know, can you just describe what chronic fatigue is? Because some people will know what it is, but people listening might not. So just help them to understand what it is that you were experiencing to get that diagnosis.
Of course. So chronic fatigue syndrome is fatigue that does not resolve with sleep. There's often, there can be many reasons to why you end up with chronic fatigue. Often, from what I've learned since, it can be a result of like multiple things, but you have one thing that kind of tips you over. So for me, it was swine flu. For others, it can be, divorce, like a highly stressful episode, operation, trauma. But basically what happens is the body is in a state of constant fatigue. So there's things that can happen with that, like digestive issues, brain fog, forgetting things, not able to kind of interact with people. You sort of you can have boom and bust. You can be okay, and then you sort of crash, especially with exercise and socializing. You might only be able, some people, I've met people who were like bedbound. I wasn't quite to that degree, but I was very much, I had 6 months off work. I was very much on the sofa most of the time. I could manage. There was a supermarket a 10-minute walk away, and I literally would sit on the benches all the way to the supermarket because you could manage a little bit of exercise, sit down, do a little bit more, sit down. And it's a really interesting condition because they basically test for everything. So I ended up at the infectious disease unit because they didn't really have a fatigue unit.
No.
And I basically got tested for everything, under the sun that you can pretty much test for in like the NHS. Obviously now I'm a functional, now I do functional medicine. There's a wider range you can test. But at that point, HIV, Hep B, Lyme disease, all those sorts of things. And they can't find anything wrong with you. They go, it's chronic fatigue syndrome. It's sort of what happened to me and sort of the same stories I hear nowadays as well.
Right. Thank you so much for explaining that. So you've got this diagnosis and you're now thinking, oh my God, that's it. My career is over.
Yeah, pretty much. I was I was a shift worker. That was no longer possible. And so I'm having to navigate losing a dream of becoming an advanced nurse practitioner. And then also recognizing, well, what does the future look like? Now, I'm a Christian, so I believe in healing, but I also know that it doesn't always end up the way you think it's going to be. So there can be a waiting period. So what do you do in the waiting? How do you still take action? So in this time of sort of wondering, what do I do? Because I am an action taker. I am somebody who likes to kind of be doing stuff. I am a doer. And somebody gave me a book that was all about nutrition, mindset, lifestyle, and Christian practices, because it's a Christian book. And I started putting them into place. And I actually started to feel better. Right. So I could see the benefits of, as I nourished my body with beneficial food, as I, made sure my lifestyle, things like reducing stress, sleep, moving, rather, I don't say exercise, I just say movement. It's still important that you move as what's appropriate for you.
Yeah.
And then I also did other things, like I did something called the lightning process, which is heavily steeped in something called neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
I also did some clinical kinesiology. Gosh, I can't say that word right now. counseling. Like I did lots of different things, but bit by bit, step by step, in 2018, I had a real sense that I was healed from chronic fatigue syndrome.
Amazing.
And that was sort of that episode over. And I did carry on nursing. So even though I couldn't no longer do shift work, I ended up as a community nurse.
Right.
And then my last job was actually, I moved into, so I became the learning environment lead for Devon Children's Community Services. So I was in Scotland actually when I got diagnosed, and then I moved back to Devon because that's where I'm from.
Right.
And yeah, so that's sort of it in a nutshell. So I guess, how did I become what I am today?
So it really,
I think
the thing that I think we need to sort of take on board from that is that you were presented with some options that hadn't been really laid out to you before, and you just basically took the bull by the horns, didn't you, and decided to just give it a go. And I guess the mentality was, well, I've got nothing to lose, so I might as well give it a try. And then when you start to see that actually I am feeling better and this stuff is working, is it that kind of really triggered you to find out more?
It definitely did. Like I had moments where I went backwards,
Right.
And I burnt out, I relapsed. But I think the episodes became shorter and shorter, and I could also start linking things, and I could go, okay, that's happened because I've been doing this, or I've been working too much at work, or we've just moved house, or I did too much exercise. Like, and I could start to see the connections.
Yeah.
And the more I learned, this just desire grew for anyone else to not be sat there and be told recovery isn't possible.
Yeah. Wow.
Because for me, it doesn't matter where you are. Okay, you may never recover from to where you were, before things happen. But I always believe that things can be better.
Yeah, brilliant. I just want to go back to something.
Right.
And that's the very fact. And it's important that we bring in your Christianity into this, I think, because it's part of that, having something to believe in, that things will be okay. Yeah. And all will be well. But equally, you don't have to be a Christian and have that religious belief to also pull in on those inner resources and realize that you said something very, very powerful, that your body does actually know how to heal itself, but we've got to take action, and that action is giving it the right tools so it can actually do that. And from what you've described, it was very much a case of sometimes 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards, working out what does work for me. And tell me about how you felt through those challenges, because I think that is a lot of the time what makes people stop doing stuff that actually is working, because like you said, they either overdo it or they just don't necessarily make those associations. So how did you mentally and emotionally get through when you did have a relapse, or when you kind of went, oh my God, is this actually really working? Try and help people understand that process.
Yeah, I think I'm still learning that process, in all honesty, because I now living with a different health issue. But I think at that point it was going, I think, and even now actually, it's really all the time going back to basics and going, I'm doing the best with what I can. It's putting those, I think, because I've done the NLP work with the lightning process, it was capturing the thoughts. And I think it's so easy to spiral. It's so easy to kind of go, okay, well, A's happened, therefore B, C, D, E, F, it's going to happen. And actually, I think I learned a lot of the time to go, just because today I've woken up, maybe my voice is gone. That's always one of the first signs, is that my voice starts to go. I've got the brain fog. I feel everything's heavy. I'm in pain. Therefore, X, Y, and Z. And I think it's capturing it and go, okay, maybe right now I'm feeling like this, but I'm going to try and go for a little walk. I'm going to try and do some praying. I'm going to try and do some journaling. Mm-hmm. And just taking those little steps. And sometimes just taking those little steps, you then find, actually, I feel a bit brighter now.
Yeah. And it's having that tool, isn't it, that you had there. For people who don't necessarily, or who've maybe never heard of the lightning process, are you able to just kind of like whistle top whirlwind what it is?
Oh gosh, that's a good question, because I can't fully remember. It was a long time ago. But it's a way of, so it's built on neuro-linguistic programming, which is a way of sort of helping to reprogram the brain, the neuro pathways. And it was a technique of almost kind of, I'm probably going to have to demonstrate because it's the easiest way I can show it. It was almost like you get a thought and you go, right, do I need to calm myself or do I need to say stop to that thought? And then you'd be like, right, if I carry on with this thought, I'm going to end up down this path and I don't want to go down that path. So I'm going to go down this path and I'm going to coach myself. And you kind of become your little coach where you go, do you know what? I'm so proud of you. You're doing awesome. What is it that you want right now? And you sort of go, okay, I just want to feel calm. Okay, well, what do you need? And it's that reconnection, I think, sometimes with our bodies.
Right.
And just going, what is it that you're telling me? What is it that you need? And
Brilliant.
I think that was helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's so powerful, because it's something that I truly believe in, is we're often so disconnected. We genuinely just don't know what it is that we do need, and just being able to ask and actually just even stop and pause to ask is sometimes all it takes for us to become fully conscious and fully aware. And that is so powerful in itself. And as you said very, very clearly there, just baby steps. When you're feeling like, you know, that spiral's happening, what can I do actually to help myself right now? And you just need to stay, even if it's, you know, for the next 20 minutes or even 1 minute sometimes, isn't it? And then just keep on moving forward. So when you kind of recognize that you were starting to get better, and you were still doing your community nursing, what happened then to make you kind of change trajectory, as it were?
Okay, so there was a change in my work situation, and I suddenly found myself in a work position that I didn't want to be in. And around that time, I also discovered what a nutritional therapist was. So I'd looked at many different ways of studying nutrition, but never anything that sat with me in a way that I was like really excited about. And so I found this course, I found what nutritional therapy was, and I got really excited because the course that I picked, it involved becoming an NLP practitioner. And because I'd had such, you know, value from what I'd done, I was like, I really like NLP. The holistic approach really appealed to me. So it was looking at the person as a whole. Because I'm a children's nurse, I was quite used to that, but it was like it was like being a detective. You could bring all the pieces together and work in a holistic way. And then there was the coaching and the NLP. And then basically I'm in this position at work, and I had a real sense that I had to leave the NHS at that moment. And I remember just thinking and praying and being like, but why now? You know, I could go in 6 months' time. And but I did it. I left. I basically, you know, ended up going back to uni and doing a postgraduate diploma in personalized nutrition. And then 6 months later, COVID hit. And because swine flu is a cousin of COVID, I've never, like, there was, I think when COVID came, I was protected because I was out of the NHS.
Right.
And it meant that I wasn't, you know, I don't know what would have happened. So my understanding is, or my belief is, that I didn't actually get COVID until before Christmas. And actually, I've seen my health deteriorate since then. You know, I am getting better, which is great. And so that's at COVID at a much weaker point. If I'd have had it perhaps
early on
at its height.
Yes.
And also I've learned a whole lot more since becoming a nutritional therapist about how to look after my body. So that was really interesting. So I left the NHS. I started a business. I was a first aid trainer. So that was quite interesting, managing that whole, oh, now what do I do? I'm like a face-to-face trainer. There's no training. But thankfully, because I was training essential workers, I actually did have enough work to pay for uni because it was self-funded. And so it all sort of came together really. And it took 3 years. So I trained for 3 years to do this. So I ended up with 3 qualifications at the end of this course.
Fabulous.
And I graduated 2 years ago. So yeah.
Fantastic. And so through the whole training and the course, obviously you in some way, I guess, were your own guinea pig. You were able to sort of try some things out on yourself, which is always good, because I think when you genuinely know from an experiential point of view that this stuff does work, it's so much easier then to be able to explain it, isn't it, to your clients?
Yeah.
Because you're coming from a place of just not knowledge, but actual inner knowing. Through experience, which is powerful. So what sort of things do you kind of specialize in terms of, you know, what do people tend to come to you with?
Mm-hmm. I think because of my story, it tends to be the fatigue-based chronic illnesses that I see a lot of. It's probably predominantly, or that sort of, perhaps nothing's been diagnosed. They haven't been diagnosed with a fatigue-based chronic illness, but they feel fatigued all the time. They're, probably burnt out. So I do see a lot of that exhaustion. I just don't know what to do to help myself. Or perhaps they do know what to do, but they just need someone to go, yes, that's the right way of doing things. Because I think it's so easy on the internet to find so many different answers. And I'm not saying I have all the answers, but sometimes you just need someone to help you
discover,
kind of go through the and be like, what's right for you.
So would you say that your work now is majority online, or obviously the whole kind of the way that everything is shifting now? Some people are now going back to face-to-face stuff as well. So how is it working for you on that score?
So actually in December, I decided to go back to face-to-face. So I set up my clinic in Tiverton in Devon. So and trained as a phlebotomist. So what I was finding is, because a lot of my clients have that fatigue-based illness, and what I want to do is see where the body's at. So you tell me your symptoms and I can get a really good idea of what's going on, where the deficiencies are, where we need to be putting support in. But I think, being that, I've come from a healthcare background, I also find testing quite valuable.
Yes, absolutely.
And so what I was finding is, I was sending my clients to the GP. It would be quite a different reaction depending on the GP. Some were absolutely fine with what I was asking, some weren't, which, understandable. Some would come back with half the tests I'd asked for, but it was just getting quite complicated, because I'd be like, right, you need to go to your GP, you need to book a blood test. Then they get the blood test, then they'd wait for the results, and then I'd have to get the results, and we'd be weeks down the line. So I was like, do you know what, I'll just do it myself. I can take the blood, we've got the results like within a week, and off we go. Thank you very much.
Makes so much sense.
I now do that. So I now do the blood testing. I do other tests as well, or offer other testing, from DNA of it's called nutrigenomics, to stool testing, to saliva, to, oh gosh, there's all sorts out there nowadays. It's incredible. I'm constantly hearing of new tests. But so I now have my clinic, and I do face-to-face. I also do online, because it depends on the need of the client. So, if a client isn't actually in the area, then we work it that they can still have the tests, but someone else just does them.
Which makes a lot of sense. And a lot of these tests that you talked about, because you mentioned that you're now more kind of on the functional medicine side of things. So you're looking at, obviously that allows you to look more into sort of root cause rather than just treating symptoms, which is obviously where a lot of the nutrition and the lifestyle stuff comes in. So would you say that for the majority of people, they come to you because they've been referred to you, and they want a diagnosis, or do often they come to you with a diagnosis and kind of go, help, I don't know what to do with this?
Yes, so I can't diagnose. That's one thing I can't do. But what I can do is go, look, based on your symptoms, this is what it would suggest. And obviously, if a diagnosis is needed, I work in collaboration with the GP, and I would get in contact with the GP. But I think a lot of people, there's a bit of a mixed bag, actually. Referrals from people who their friends are talking, and they're like, I don't feel great. And they're like, Claire could probably help with that. Or even people who've heard my story and go, oh gosh, I really relate to what you've said. I think that's where I'm at right now. So they might not have gotten to the point where they've got to the GP, or they've gone to the GP and the GP just goes, your bloods are fine. So I hear that a lot from my clients. And that's because, the NHS looks at bloods in a different way to what I do. So they look at, what's clinically significant. Correct. Whereas what I tend to find with a lot of my clients is there's the optimal. So there's the optimal range where, your body is at its happiest, thank you very much. And then you've got your outliers. Yeah. And the outliers is information. It shows me, okay, what's actually going on in your body? What's your body telling me that fits in with perhaps what you've told me about how you're feeling and the symptoms you've got? And so it's just a different viewpoint.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I must admit, I use functional medicine testing, as and where appropriate. Not everybody needs it, but some people like to have that evidence, don't they, almost? And then when you can offer them the test again and they can actually see just via the testing the improvements, even though they know they feel better, sometimes some people like to just be able to see it in black and white as well. So how long, because I'm sure it's a question that you're not going to be able to answer fully, but I'm sure it's a question that you also get asked a lot. How long do people tend to work with you for? And what does that look like? Do you see them once a week, once a month? How does it work?
Sure. Yeah, every case is slightly different. I mean, I have my packages. I mean, some people, so I have like a package where I just review your food diary, and it's looking at, okay, you're perhaps experiencing energy slumps. You kind of just want somewhere to start.
Yes.
And that's, just a couple of consultations, right through to my main package is 5 months, because actually for a lot of people with chronic illness and burnout, it's a really baby step process. And so I include testing as standard with that one, just because often the type of client that I'm working with, they've been around the houses, they're already quite depleted. And I just want to be like, look, let's just find out what's going on and kind of get a good baseline.
Yeah.
But I meet people once a fortnight because I find that works well. Because once a month seems a bit too long, especially at the beginning. Like once you've sort of been working with someone for a while, once a month is fine. But at the beginning, once a fortnight just helps them to kind of stay on track. And also if anything gets flagged up, it's picked up quicker.
Right, which absolutely makes sense. So you include a test within there. Is that the same test for everybody, or does it depend on what they're coming to you with and what they're explaining their symptoms are?
Yeah, so the blood test is standard for everyone because it's a full whack, blood test looking at everything. And then the second test, it will slightly change depending on the individual that I see in front of me and what I feel is sort of needed for them.
Right. And how do you get on, and I'm sure you get this a lot as well, with somebody who comes to you on all kinds of what I call a shopping list of medications that they may have gotten from their GP?
I take people where they're at. So if you're on a shopping list of medication, then I make sure that any recommendations are in line with the medication. So I'm always safe. So I check interactions, I check side effects of medications with any supplements that I recommend. And some people do come off their medication, but I would always emphasize that has to be done with a GP. I am not going to tell you to stop taking medication. I'm not going to say start taking medication. But if something flags up and I'm like, actually, I think you really need to see your GP about that. It's the fun ones when they come and go, oh, Claire, I've stopped stuff. And I'm like, have you told your GP? And they're like, no. I'm like, right. First things first, I'm writing a letter. Let's get your GP on board with this.
Yeah. And I think that is something. Yeah. I think a lot of people recognize that some of the medications that they're on are for the side effects of other medications that they're on. So if they can reduce that list as quickly as possible, they want to do it without thinking, oh, I actually better let my GP know what's happening.
Yeah, but some medications you have to be careful how you come off them. So that's why I'm like, I do have knowledge of medications. I am a nurse. However,
so your background means that
I'm going to tell you what to do with them.
So when somebody says to you, I think, I'm feeling so much better, what do you kind of then say to them? Because a lot of these issues, as you've said, with your own experience, is that they can it can sometimes be a bit of a roller coaster, can't it? There can be periods of times when you almost feel like you're going backwards and they show up again. So is this something that you prepare your clients for whilst you're working with them? Or is it a case of let's cross that bridge if and when it happens?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think sometimes I perhaps could be deemed as erring on the side of caution. And I'm like very aware that you can go backwards and forwards. And so I will share that. So we do, with some of my clients, I do future visioning exercises. And we do talk about what do you hope things to look like? And that just allows me to then go, okay, what is realistic and what is actually might take longer than you think? So that I can set, so the whole thing is setting expectations, I think, from the beginning where I can.
Right.
Because
So
I think it's important for people to know that, you know, things are possible, but some of the things, you know, often it's the weight loss goal of, I want to reduce by, sometimes it's a lot more than is safe to lose. And so you have to be like, right, I just want to recalibrate on that one and say, I'm not saying it's not possible that you can't lose that, but you might need a much longer time frame than you think is needed. Because a lot of these things, whilst it is baby steps, and I'm sure you know this with your clients, Vicky, it's about, I want to make myself redundant at the end of the day, because I want to make sure, even though we do it slower, it's going to be sustainable, and you're going to like really ingrain those habits. We all know that habits take around, I think the research says 21 days to start a habit, and then about 63 to kind of keep it fully ingrained.
All completely been debunked. These timeframes, they've all been debunked.
Oh, has it?
Yeah, totally. These are just stuff that
I missed that one then.
People keep repeating this because people keep repeating it and therefore believe it's true. But the science shows that no, that is not true. It's actually based upon misquoted information.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thanks for telling me, Vicky. No, it's good. That shows that I missed that piece of evidence coming out. So I will take that out of my vocabulary. Okay, I'll ignore that then. But
what we do tend to know when it comes to actually getting habits to a space and a place where they become automated, it's around about a year. For them to be fully automated and ingrained. And obviously it's a case of how long is a piece of string, because it depends what the habit is, how long you've been doing it for, what are the associations that you have with it, how powerful are they, and what actually does it entail for you to change that habit. In other words, how much resistance is there? And so when you take into account all of those things, it's very much a time frame that tends to be longer than shorter. Can we change a habit overnight? Yeah, absolutely we can. Right? Can other habits take up to 240 days, 365? Yes, absolutely they can. But yeah, the 21 days and the 66 days is it always makes me smile, because it's like it's out of context and it's not true.
No worries. I guess the valuable part though to pull out of that, whilst the timeframes may not be correct anymore, is that it takes time to sustain a habit.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing, or I do for my clients. I'm sure you do for yours, Vicky, that it's about actually how do we sustain a habit even when we feel like we've gone backwards.
Yeah.
And that's where, that's why. Yeah.
And I think for you, that's why I asked you that question, because you've been there. And so when people say, what do I do? I feel like this is happening. At least you can say, actually, this is part of the process, and it is to be expected. And that's, in that just sentence, it's just such a relief, I think, isn't it? To know that, because do you find that, I know I kind of do find with certain things, because a lot of my clients end up, because of their issues, that they may end up with autoimmune problems, which are going to be things that we're never going to completely cure them. We're never going to be completely able to eliminate them. But what we can do is kind of manage, as you said, the expectations around them. And I think that is such a crucial thing, that people know it is a part of the process, but don't expect it to be gone forever. And just working with you, it doesn't mean that they're cured, does it?
No, and I would never say that. But you can definitely feel better. Yeah. And I think that's the thing that we have to take into consideration. Like, for example, so I had COVID, I believe, for the first time before Christmas, and I have seen that I've had an episode of post-viral fatigue. And it's been really interesting, because it sort of woke me up a little bit to be like, actually, I can't be complacent. I still need to be making sure I'm looking after myself, because even though you think, I'm great, stuff still happens in life. And I think even when stuff happens, and it's remembering the tools that you've built in. So I talk a lot about non-negotiables, when I do them, like, okay, I don't do them every morning, but when I do them, I feel so much better for doing them. And it's just little things like that. Like, what is it that when I do it, it makes me feel brighter? I feel more engaged. It helps me to feel like okay, I've got this. It's just it's just a moment in time, and this too shall pass is like, a
Love
good
it.
saying too, isn't it?
Absolutely it is, because if we get het up on how bad we're feeling in and of that moment, that's kind of all we can feel and see, isn't it? And like you said, being able to use that lightning process and to just help you to reframe things and have the skills and the tools and the understanding, as you've really pointed out, of what works for me. And that's the thing that you offer, isn't it? That space for people to help them to discover that for themselves with your guidance and support. But ultimately it is about them, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Like, I've had people cry at me because they were like, you believe me, you believe that I'm feeling this way. And I'm like, yeah, because that's what your body's telling me. Whereas they've just spent, years perhaps being told by medical professionals that it's, there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
And
Or
I
it's
think
all in
that
your
for
head.
me is such a privilege. It's all in your
Yeah.
head. I know that phrase.
That phrase.
It's such a blessing to be able to give people that space.
Yeah, amazing. So if somebody is listening to this and they're going, oh my God, I need to speak to Claire, right? Where do they find you? You've said you've got a brick and mortar establishment in Devon, but how can they find you elsewhere if they don't live in Devon?
Okay, so I'm online at nourishtosoar.co.uk, Instagram and at Nourish to Soar, and LinkedIn is Claire Thomas, I think Devon. So
Brilliant.
yeah.
Fantastic. And I will put all of those links in the show notes if you are listening on audio, and it'll be in the description if you are watching on YouTube. So Claire, I have a little tradition that I ask my guests to leave our listeners with one thing that you would like them to just take away from what you've shared. So what is that one thing?
So many things. I think it is that knowledge that, this will pass and all things are possible. I think it can be so easy to lose hope when you're in the midst of it. So you'll get there. You really will.
Heard it. You heard it here from Claire. This too shall pass and all things are possible. I think one of the biggest things that I want people to take away from speaking with you is to know that having a diagnosis and being told that this is it, for life, does not mean that you cannot create a healthy lifestyle and feel better for yourself. And as you said, it is possible. It is wonderful.
Yeah, definitely.
Folks, if you've enjoyed what you have heard, don't forget to hit the like button and do subscribe if you haven't done already, because the more people who subscribe, the more people we can help by encouraging our listeners to pass it on to other people. And I'm going to leave you with this, as I always do. We only have one life, as far as we know, and one body. Please look after it, because it is looking after you. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.